Hi, listeners. Raven here. Before you listen to today's episode, I want to let you know that it features discussions on sexual assault, rape, and domestic abuse. If one or all of these are an issue for you, you might want to go ahead and skip today's episode. We will list some resources in the show notes. Welcome to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I am Raven, and I've seen CSI through and through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick, and these are my first time experiencing these episodes.
And today we are reviewing Season 3, Episode 14, One Hit Wonder. Original air date is February 6, 2003. Director is Felix Enriquez Alcala. Writers are Anthony E. Zeiker and Corey Miller. And we begin today's episode the way that we begin many episodes, with shots of the Vegas Strip. So Nick, what was our Vegas score for this episode?
Our Vegas score is 22, and it is entirely derived from our opening scene.
Oh my goodness.
As far as I can tell, there is no other shot of the Vegas Strip. There's 3 shots. It lasts like 13 seconds. Mm-hmm. There's like a weird third shot where I don't know. They're supposed to be reflecting off of something, I think. You can definitely see the Vegas Strip behind it. So before I even knew this was going to be the only scene, I decided to count it. But I was surprised. I literally got to the end of the episode and I was like, I must have forgotten to write down more scenes.
Yeah.
And the second watch through, I kept being like, nope, still not another scene yet. Still not. But I better be paying attention. I'm going to miss it. And then nothing came. So if you're out there listening and you watch this episode and you think you, especially later in the episode, have a Vegas Strip shot that I may have missed, let us know. Mm-hmm. But it does make the score is a 22, which I didn't even write down. Could have been a contender for a big score with an early 22, but instead there was nothing.
So we leave the Vegas Strip, evidently, for the rest of the episode, and we go to a woman asleep at home. She, I think, hears something, and then she gets up, she walks out into the living room, she notices blood on the light switch, there's like a water on the table, and she starts freaking out. She's very upset because someone has been in her apartment. And then we sort of like fast zoom, like zip on over to another apartment with a woman in bed, and there's a guy on top of her. Like she is being actively assaulted in this scene. And I feel like this sets the tone for the episode in the sense that it's very jarring.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird
very,
moments.
Sharp cuts, and just the content of the episode. It's just a very jarring
at first I didn't know it was trying to be edgy, and I don't think it is. I think it's just the content itself is very, uncomfortable, but it's very honest, and you're sort of making you face it. The episode was called One Hit Wonder, and I actually never really understood why it was called One Hit Wonder.
I don't know either.
But yeah, I would say like both the plot lines, and I'll hold off on commenting on the second plot line. They both realize they basically deal with many facets of untoward people, right? These are not necessarily a crime of passion or, something like that, but, that systematic,
calculated,
negative behaviors of humans and how they go on the others. And like, these are facts of our lives. And this is probably a big part of crime scenes that have to be solved. Crimes have to be solved, and crime scenes have to be processed. It felt very Law and Order SVU in a lot of ways.
Yes.
But there was, I don't know, there was only like one time where I was like, I'm not really sure. I maybe went a little bit too far, but I think they did the best they could with it through the episode. And I think as we go through it, I mean, let me know if there's any scenes that are, you feel differently about, but it was not like a disrespectful job. It was just, it is just the composition of this episode is a little weird, I think, as a result.
Yes. We go to Grissom, Catherine, and Jim Brass on scene. We learn that apartment 1213 and 1214 have been broken into. 1213 was not assaulted because they had a treadmill blocking the door. 1214 was the woman in 1214, and she is not letting anyone of the male persuasion near her at the moment. So Catherine enters the apartment. She tells the officers to go. I appreciate that Catherine is standing up for the victim and is like, look, I don't care what your protocol is. She's terrified of men right now. you need to go.
It was
So
kind of
she,
weird. I've never dealt with this, like, oh, I'm not allowed to leave the scene. I'm the first officer kind
yeah,
of
I don't remember
thing
that happening in
before.
an earlier episode.
Yeah, and I will also say that I was so confused by the treadmill thing the first time, and I went back and I missed. I rewatched the first scene, and I missed it, but in the second watch through, they do show the treadmill, but their gap in the door, a human being could easily fit through that. So it's shot really weird
Yeah, make it
in the
look
first
like,
scene. But the
yeah,
idea is like the first person, there's someone in their house. From the original scene, they couldn't get into the bedroom because a treadmill was blocking the door, and presumably then went to the another door,
went to the other
you know,
apartment.
down
Yeah,
down the way.
yeah. So the door cracks open. Before we follow that thread, though, we're with Grissom and Jim Brass. They're in the other apartment. Jim Brass shows Grissom how the perpetrator was able to enter the home. They can basically just put their hand through the window and then like unlock the sliding door and then open the sliding door. So as they're kind of assessing that, Grissom also realizes that someone was watching this victim. Like there's like a face print.
Multiple, right?
Yeah, on the glass, like on the sliding door, or maybe the window. I'm not quite sure. We go to credits again. I appreciate that there was no like quip to credits.
Yeah.
They accepted the tone of the episode, and there was no quip to credits. So thank you CSI
No
for
weird
not trying to
peeping
make a
tom
yeah
creeping through, like, oh, I guess we'll have to look through this person's eyes or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
none of that. I appreciate it. Thank you CSI. Catherine enters, who we learn is Joanne's room, and she immediately wants nothing to do with providing information or giving over evidence. She doesn't know what he looks like. She just wants to take a shower. So Catherine is talking to her and trying to kind of persuade her in a nice way, like in a not heavy-handed way. I guess I don't know. I guess I have mixed feelings on this about I don't know if how Catherine approached it is the way that you should approach it or not.
It's really interesting because I think that is a really, really good exchange from the victim standpoint.
Yes.
Talk about, like, you hear, I feel like one of the biggest things you hear all the time is like how underreported sexual assault crimes and
Hmm.
similar crimes are.
Yep.
And I think it's very much on outside looking in, whether you're, somebody who's not normally targeted for crimes like this, or you've just never been targeted, to think like, well, why aren't they reporting these people? Why do they not want to file charges?
Right. Oh, I
And
think from a victim perspective, this was very realistic.
yeah. And it was good to hear both the side of it. Like, I want to move forward. Like, I don't want to like dwell on this, but also
Yeah.
the like, not for nothing, but I don't know that I care about other people that much.
Right, especially in this moment. Like
So
right after this happened, my thoughts are probably not going to be
yeah.
on other people.
So I think that in a lot of ways, Catherine's response is, well, we wanted to say that thing out loud,
Yeah.
that this is the way people feel.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do we get somebody who's vocalizing that forward? And this is like without like a really long drawn out scene.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're trying to explain to somebody how important it is. It's just like, okay, maybe I can use your motivation to
Yeah.
encourage you.
To encourage
and,
you.
And they do it that way. So they're maybe cheaping out a little bit here. But if that was the reason why, then I forgive that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think overall, I think I end up being fine with this scene. I think it's just, I don't know the right way to talk to
Yeah.
a victim of
And
sexual assault. And so I think there's just part of me that worries that maybe Catherine's way was a little bit too heavy-handed, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I am not an expert in this field. So it's just, but we
presumably someone like Catherine has some training in this, but
you would
is
think
also
so.
not an expert. You know what I mean?
Right.
She has
She's
some
a CSI.
skills.
She's not
some
a therapist.
experience.
She's not, yeah, for sure. We also learn in the scene that he didn't rape her, and what is in her hair is not hair gel.
Yeah, that was weird.
She doesn't want to say. I also wonder if this was what would get you above a PG-13. Like
What
were the laws around?
Oh, by not like saying we showed a rape scene.
No,
because they use the word semen a lot.
They say semen, but that's a technical term.
But that's not what somebody would say. Okay, yeah.
That's not what you would say. You wouldn't be like,
correct.
She's saying like, oh, he didn't rape me. And Catherine's like trying to understand what she means. And she's like, well, this isn't hair gel. and maybe we're gonna have to like put an explicit note on this episode. I don't know, but you would say something like, "Oh, he jacked off on me.
Yeah, he jacked off. He came.
He
He
came,"
whatever.
something, one of those sort of things. And I
Yeah, you
wonder
probably
if
can't say a lot of those words
that's what I
on
wonder on like
8 p.m. TV or something,
that's I
ABC
wonder
or
if
whatever it
that's
was.
the reasoning for kind of the how this was worded. But
I think maybe just worth taking a second to say, like, they're using the word rape here in a very technical sense. I think from a
yes,
sociological place, we would say this person was, raped in a sense. The legal difference between rape and sexual assault, I'm sure varies state by state, but like I think that if you were in that position, you are is violated as somebody who might have been, molested in different ways or penetrated in different ways. And so it's at least worth note, like, they're trying to think what they can get this person in on a crime for, not so much,
yes,
whether or not I'm sure this person feels as violated as some people who are raped.
yeah. I think you're correct in that they they want to know, or they are assessing the difference from a legal and prosecution standpoint, not from a judging how bad the victim should feel.
I wrote down in my notebook, like, I'd call that rape, but sure.
Yeah, I think they're looking from a what could we prosecute this person with, and I think under the guise of the law,
Yeah.
it would not. It would qualify as sexual assault, but it wouldn't qualify as rape. So we then have work outside. He's taking some photographs. He then finds a shoe print, so he's making a mold. Grissom lifts prints from a window. Nick finds a crusted semen stain. So I was surprised that he said this right after they just had this
Yeah.
very roundabout not wanting to admit what was going on. I was like, oh, crusted
I also like
semen
that, like,
stain. That's fine.
Grissom like walks away from him when he's trying to talk to him.
Yeah,
But then somehow, despite Grissom's hearing being an undertone, not just in this episode, but in a lot of recent episodes,
yeah.
is apparently able to hear him from very far away while he's
Yes.
taking collecting this other evidence.
Yes.
Because he
evidently.
responds to Nick's comments just 20 feet away.
Yeah. We leave this storyline. We leave storyline A. We're with Sarah. She's entering a courtroom. There's a prosecutor giving like a very passionate, like, closing statement of a case about why the jury should convict the person. Sarah then approaches her once the session ends, and the prosecutor thanks Sarah for coming in on such short notice. But
So this prosecutor is my first of many this episode spot the guest star. Oh yeah, I forgot to open my IMDb tab, but this is I wrote down
Elizabeth
is
Mitchell.
Elizabeth Mitchell.
She
and
plays
she
Melissa Winters.
most famously to me, Erica Evans on a little TV show called V, which is a remake of a 80s-esque or 80s-ish, maybe earlier sci-fi show starring a number of other people like Morena Baccarin and Laura Vandervoort, who I know from playing Small Girl on Smallville.
Yeah.
Or not Small Girl, Supergirl on Smallville. And was like a show that I really liked that just got like yanked off the air, I think, after the first season. But she's like a main character in that show. She's like the main human character in that show, and is also a detective, I believe, in that show. Which is, okay, she's not a detective in this show, but an interesting tie-in. Or she's some kind of government agent.
She's evidently also in 57 episodes of Lost. And so I didn't count her as a spot the guest star, even though I recognized her. But I think I just like recognized her from like seeing clips of Lost and never like really watching Lost. So I didn't count it as a spot the guest star because I couldn't I couldn't definitively say, oh yeah, that's definitely how I know her. And so she definitely was like, oh, I know her, but then I was like, I couldn't definitively say. So I did not count this as a spot the guest star for me.
I've actually never watched Lost, but as soon as you said that, I said, oh yeah, right. She was also in that show because, well, I've never watched it. I've never seen it. And the people that I used to live with, 20 years ago or whatever, when Lost was on, were watching it all the time. And so like walking through the living room, it would be on, and also commercials. 20 years ago, I watched a lot of commercials.
Yeah. So that's where I think I know her from. So she and Sarah are having a conversation. She thanks Sarah for coming on such short notice, and she lets Sarah know that the case that they were working on together, she handed over to another DA because she's going to be dead. She's not going to
Yeah.
be able to make that court date because she's going to be dead.
He's like, I'm gonna be dead.
I'll be dead. I wrote down in my notes, I'll be dead. And that was her exact line. We stay with these characters, but in a different location. And this is where we learn that the prosecutor is in a wheelchair due to an incident where someone shot and killed her husband and then shot her. And now she has to go in for surgery because the bullet that was like lodged into her neck has migrated, and they have to like go in and clip an artery. And it seems like the odds of surviving this surgery are very, very low.
Yeah,
So
they
she's trying to prepare Sarah for this.
They quote some odds later on that are pretty
yes.
bad.
Yes, I have them in my notes.
But they're pretty good. I will also say, spoiler alert, watching this on the second time through, this scene is just bizarre to watch from the courtroom all the way through
Yes.
not bizarre, but it's just like it hits differently.
It does hit
It's one of the few scenes in this episode that's truly like kind of fun to watch a second time.
Yeah, I agree. We then have Catherine walking up to Greg Sanders, and we learn that the semen that was collected from the victim's hair is low volume. It has no sperm. They won't say it. It's pre-ejaculate. She says it later, I think.
Yeah.
But they won't say it in this scene. So it's pre-ejaculate. Catherine then walks into a room where Grissom is, and she's trying to get him up to speed on what's happening with the case so far, but his hearing is going in and out. It's like muffled, and then he's hearing a bit, and then he's not hearing. And then he very purposely stares directly at Catherine so he can read her lips.
So this might be the first time, I think, that, and I don't know how intentional this was, but my understanding of what he's experienced maybe shifted a little.
Okay.
Where I was thinking that he was always hearing at this reduced volume and then relying heavily.
It goes in and out.
Yeah, it's going in and out, and they use her volume to sort of turn it up and then also like the expression on his face, you realize all of a sudden he's actually understanding what the conversation is about, and then it re-engages, and then he's able to have more conversations at a distance, which makes my comment earlier with Nick like less pertinent, because obviously if he's hearing well at that time, he can hear from 20 feet away. I just wasn't really, I think, and maybe this is something they're doing for the audience or they're just doing a better job of it. But previously, without any other experience, I actually don't think I was quite understanding. And they have said like, it comes in and out, but I was thinking it was always bad, right? And it was just attenuating between bad and really bad.
Yeah, no.
When in reality, sometimes
I think it's
seems supposed to be quite normal.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and that was kind of a new discovery for me.
Yeah. So they end up having an engaged conversation, and they're talking about the progression from peeping Tom into a sexual predator. We then have Catherine, Warwick, Grissom, and Nick talking. As they're talking, Greg Sanders enters, and the other semen that was collected does have DNA, but no match in the system. But the perpetrator has a low sperm count, which leads into this episode's attempt to have a haha moment. Not great. Not the worst moment in CSI history of like trying to make light of something that's like not really what we should be making light of.
I
appreciate that like both of the storylines are heavy. So it was like, okay, well, we can't go to like haha storyline B to get comic relief. So we're going to try to use Greg Sanders and sort of Nick to lighten up the mood, but fell a little short for me. But I understand what they were trying to do.
I also want to say the number of times I feel like the tiniest amount of DNA exists on like the most incidental bodily fluids.
Yes.
The fact they were like, oh no, there's no semen, so there's zero chance that we get any DNA from that first sample to try to match to like the semen on the outside wall.
Maybe
they
now
just kind of glossed over it.
Maybe now it could be done.
I feel like it probably was doable because like I don't know, there's skin cells coming off in that. You're on the bed, like swab the bed. You know what I mean? Like you got to be able to find dandruff somewhere or a hair fiber. They just kind of gloss over it because it's important to the mystery of the episode, and I get it. But this is one of the things that was like bothering me on the second watch too. So I just wanted to call it out for anyone else out there.
That's fair.
It was like, how come they didn't do that?
Yeah. We are then with Sarah. She walks into the morgue where Doc Robbins is. She wants him to walk her through the surgery that Melissa is going to be undertaking. And so then we get kind of like a Doc Robbins voiceover as the surgery is actually being performed. And so this is where we get the odds. This is where Doc Robbins lets her know that 9 out of 10 times the surgery fails.
I gotta tell you,
I'm surprised they're still doing the surgery.
I'm glad they're giving Doc Robbins credit for being a real doctor, which he is.
Yes.
A real medical doctor. He's not just like a guy who looks at dead corpses.
Yeah.
But, and if there are any doctors out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but from my experience in medicine, there are so many diseases, so many surgeries, so many things. If you are not adjacent to this field, the idea that you would have that level of comprehension is crazy. It is an audience explainer.
It is an audience explainer.
It's like all those things add up. But I was like, wait, how does Doc Robbins know so much about this surgery? I was like, and in the middle of the scene, I was like, oh, is this gonna be like, oh, I had to have a similar thing when I had to decide whether to have my leg healed or something, and like tie it into his character, and that would have been really cool. And they did not do that. Again, time machine writers for CSI, feel free to pick me up and bring me back 20 years ago. I can make this show the best show on television.
Maybe. And so we stay with Sarah, but now she is at a hospital. She approaches the doctor that performed the surgery, and this is my spot. The guest
good.
star.
Oh, I want to know where you know this character from, because I feel like I know this from a guilty pleasure of mine.
I think same. So this is Rick Worthy. In this episode, he plays Dr. Stewart, and I know him from The Vampire Diaries. Yeah,
he is Bonnie Bennett's dad, and mayor at one point. I was like, I saw him like, isn't this guy a mayor in some show that I watched?
He is. He's like the mayor, ex-mayor, or something like that. Yeah. So that is where I know him. So this is my first spot, the guest star. And this is where we get confirmation that Melissa Winters pulled through the surgery, and Sarah is elated, but Sarah is still a criminalist. So she asks for the bullet, because the bullet is evidence in the crime committed against Melissa and her husband.
This bullet gets a lot of time in this episode.
It gets a lot of time.
I want to go on record right now. It does nothing other than spike Sarah's interest. We can do, it's debatable maybe at some point, but like it doesn't indicate the person who committed the crime as committing the crime.
No, that is true.
It's kind of a red herring.
It's a little bit
of a red herring. It does get her to deep dive in the case, which is actually in a lot of ways cooler, because she just uses the existing evidence to solve the crime.
Right. Yes. Yep. So we'll definitely dive deeper into that. But before we do, work is in the lab with the mold that he made of the shoe, and following a pattern here, we got some funky music playing.
I heard the music and I thought for sure this is coming up.
Funky music playing.
One song every episode.
Yep, I was like, all right. I was like, this is it. Catherine enters.
This isn't the writer for the music director of the episode.
Yeah. Catherine enters. We learn that the shoe is a size 8. Then Catherine walks into where Jackie, the prince woman, is, and evidently the guy was like pressing hard on the window, and of course Catherine has to make like a quip like, yeah, well, with one hand, aka like we know what he was doing with his other hand.
Again, any moment to make a weird masturbation joke, it's going to be our only comedy. So
Hey, Jackie, Christmas print any good? The deposition pressure's heavy. The guy was really pressing hard on that window. Well, with one hand anyway.
And so Jackie ended up using software to process the print. They get a match to a Justin Lamond.
I think my comment here is they clearly use software to distort a print and then just played you that clip in reverse.
Yes, probably.
It's like a weird like photo blender tool circa 2003. They definitely could not have done what they did, at least the way they did it with the final results they showed in 2003. We probably would use like AI generative fill today to make it look that clean, but it was kind of like, all right, computers are magic. Got it.
Yep. So then we're with Jim Brass and Catherine. They're at a food court. They're looking for Justin. Catherine spots him on an escalator. And again, just continuing the masturbation jokes. Jim Brass is like, that has to be him because he's pitching a tent.
Yeah.
It's like,
I literally was like,
we're just really staying on this one. This is a bit weird.
Also, involuntary reactions are not criminal.
agreed. But I think later on in the episode,
I'm not defending this character.
yeah, I was like, let's not defend this character.
He is the third worst character on the episode.
I was like, let's not defend him. So they take him aside and they realize that he is outfitted to like take like up skirt photos. He has like a camera
Jim
on
Brass
his
has
shoe.
seen this before.
He must have, because he was just like, he like opens his fanny pack and he's like, this is a cover. I know it is. Bam. Like, he's just like,
he's got a blinking red light on his shoe, which honestly, dude, you're gonna put all the trouble to put a camera like into your shoe and you can't put a piece of black duct tape over the blinking red light.
Come on.
Kids these days, they just don't know how to hack their shoes.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back with this kid in a bit, but before then, Sarah is with Bobby and Ballistics, and they're talking about how, the body is an amazing thing and how tissue, formed around this bullet to protect the body from the leaching of lead from the bullet. And as Bobby's trying to like clean it up, Bobby wants to confirm that Sarah got Grissom's approval. It's very important to him that Grissom approved of this investigation. Sarah is adamant that he did, and
he's very like flirty. I feel
really? I didn't read this as flirty. That's
like,
funny. Maybe
it's like, Sarah Seidel, do you really? She's
yeah.
Like, oh yes, maybe. I do.
Okay. I didn't read it that way, but maybe listeners, let me know. Yeah. Is that the vibe you got from this scene? That's not how I read it, but I could be wrong. Maybe that is how it was meant to be.
I think we're supposed to assume the answer is no, but they actually never really
confirm it one way or the other.
That there's no like, I can't believe you did this behind my back, Sarah moment from Grissom, or anything like that. She does tell him about it at the end of the episode, so he's not completely out of the loop. But I don't know if that was like a little piece of cutting room floor that went on there, but yeah, there was like a big weird back and forth for what didn't seem to matter.
Yeah, it doesn't end up getting confirmed one way or the other. And I guess regardless of that, yeah, they fully clean the bullet. We're then with Jim Brass and Catherine with Jason. And, this teenager knows what's up. It's only breaking the law if you record their voices. So what he's doing is not against the law. That's not
cringiest.
True.
One of the cringiest scenes, just because like his dialogue is
so gross,
so bad.
It's so gross. Yeah. And then we get a montage of videos that he took. So we get like a montage of like up the skirt and like looking at women's breasts. And
so this is what I thought was like, maybe they didn't need to show us 8 different clips.
I don't think they did. I don't think we needed 8 different clips to get glad the point made here.
I'm sure people got their SAG card for the month as a result of being in those clips, and I'm happy for those people. But like, I feel like the editor, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but I felt like somebody just wanted to show like upskirt photos for like 15 seconds of the episode. We could have had another Vegas strip scene.
We could have had another Vegas strip scene here. And I don't mind them showing a clip or two maybe to get the point across, because maybe they want to really guide the audience and understand what he was.
Camera on his shoe. Yeah,
that's fine. But it was gratuitous, the amount of scenes and the length of this montage. But once it doesn't like really get better from here for him. He's just gross the entire way through. And so now they're trying to say like, hey, we're looking at you for this assault. And he's saying like, hey, I spy, but I don't engage. And Catherine gets a mold of his shoes, but there's 3 sizes difference between his shoe size and the size of the mold from outside the house. So
it was not the butt I thought you were going to go into there.
All right, what's the butt that you thought I was going to go into?
Yes. Well, she went to get a mold of the shoes, but she leaned over the table and they had a very gratuitous Catherine butt shot for 3 seconds to imply that he's checking her out. And then she gets like, fired up by it, kind of.
Yeah.
Because she catches him, and I literally thought you were about to say that.
I didn't. I must have just blocked that out because this character just grossed me out so much, and I feel like
it just keeps the sleaze going. That's what I mean. Like, and Jim Brass is like appropriately like ready to put this guy through the ringer at the end.
Yeah,
he's not getting off easy for sure. But yeah, no, this is like almost just like this is almost like a different C plot. Just like, we're going to take this one kid down.
Yes. Yeah. Like, we're not, maybe we can't get you for sexual assault, but like, we're going to get you for voyeurism, basically, like criminal voyeurism.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many misdemeanors and, I don't know, potentially felonies committed.
I would agree, and I hope so. I hope he got the full letter of the law thrown at him. This
I will say
hypothetical
that
character.
the thing that really got me is he had a line. It was like, what I don't do like this, that, or the other thing. And there were like bathrooms. And then he was like fat chicks. And I was like, what? Like, okay, you don't do bathrooms. I'm sure that's an entirely new set of laws you'd be breaking it. Not nudity.
Fair.
Like that. But then like, then he said like blue veins. I was like, this is the weirdest, creepiest. Who wrote this?
Evidently, the person that knew what like 60% of Twitter was going to be like today.
That's true. This is a Tumblr. This person was just off of early Tumblr.
Yeah. So we thankfully leave Justin to never see him again. Catherine walks into Warwick, who's in the lab, and he's letting her know that he found a yellow substance in the, basically like picked up by the mold of the shoe. He's starting to think it is road paint. And so then Catherine walks into Grissom's office, and this is where we learn that the perpetrator has like a type of apartment that they go after, right? It's like sea level.
It was kind of confusing.
It
was kind of confusing to follow. I think he was basically saying a certain layout and position.
Yes.
In these like block apartments.
Yes.
And then it was like, oh, there's so many of them. And I was like, of course there are. That's how they build apartments. They just lick them and stick them.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And this is where we get another kind of a moment of insight into the progression of sexual predators, is that they widen their zone in a spiral pattern outwards. So they start in like a pretty small comfort area, and then as they expand their zone, they kind of expand it like spirally going outwards.
That we're get like a Fibonacci sequence reference here, or golden ratio, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That seems like a very like nerdy Grissom comment to make.
Yeah. So then Jim Barres calls them and confirmed essentially their worst fears, that the perpetrator has gone further and now has raped someone. I don't want to say not just sexual assault, but again, from a law standpoint, they went from sexual assault.
The charge,
to
right?
rape.
It says like they've
charge,
moved from sexual assault to rape.
Yeah, the charge has changed. Grissom, though, not going. Says Catherine can handle it. And
she looks better on camera.
Yeah, and Catherine's like, what do you mean? Like, this is a high profile case. Why do you keep staying behind? And he tries to say it's because she looks better on camera. She's not buying this. She's like, this doesn't make sense.
Didn't they have this conversation? Isn't she's wise to this, right? In the other episode.
She's not wise to his hearing.
Oh, okay. Because there was something.
They had an earlier conversation about him not being a team player, about him kind of like leaving his team stranded. I
was trying to remember what that other episode was where it was super high profile, so he didn't want to touch any of the evidence. I felt like he told somebody, like maybe not the full truth, but like a partial truth. And so that I didn't know if Catherine was that person.
No, she still doesn't know at this stage. So then Catherine and Jim Barres are on scene, and we learn that the press is calling the perpetrator the sliding door rapist. And in this instance, he wore a condom. So that means like he's smart, like fairly smart at least, and is like not leaving, as much evidence behind. Then we hear a woman yelling, and she's calling for the police, and they rush over there, and she has a man pinned to the ground. And she is very proud of herself. And I feel like kudos to you, lady. We get her name in a bit.
She is technically, I didn't recognize her until later on in much better lighting, but she is one of my Spot the Guest stars. This is Leslie Grossman, who I know as playing Eleanor's mom in The Good Place, which I actually, when I looked it up, she's only in like 2 episodes, but she's in like one of the most recent seasons that I've watched of that show.
I should have known her. She's in 48 episodes of American Horror Story.
She is, and I watched a lot of American Horror Story, but I do not recognize her from that.
How do I
and some of the photos I saw on IMDb. I was like, oh, I can tell you what season that is, and yeah, I guess I should have known that, but yeah, no. She looks. When I realized The Good Place is actually shot a lot closer to when the CSI episode was recorded, and she basically looks like the same person. Whereas they're sort of costumed up in period, maybe like period specific or scene specific in a show like American Horror Story. So it was a little more difficult to determine.
Yeah, that is fair. So we'll come back to her. She plays Wendy in this episode. We'll come back to her in a bit. Before we do, Sarah
Oh
is
yeah,
looking.
all the characters I have weird names. It's like lawyer, doctor.
Yeah.
I wrote victim, which she's not really a victim. I didn't really understand what was going on yet
Oh, okay.
in the scene, but
Yeah.
The last one is just written as criminal.
Yes.
Which we will probably get to shortly.
We will get to shortly. We have Sarah looking over the original case. Nick enters. We learn that the CSI who worked the case originally is a person called Terry Flannery, and they were retiring, which comes up again later. And Sarah is pointing out that how the wound is on the victim, the only way that it would look that way is if his back had been against the floor or a wall when he was shot.
Yeah, it's indicative of like, there's something pushing back against you as the bullet enters.
Yes. So that doesn't quite make sense at this point.
Because in the reenactment we've seen so far,
he was standing up.
He was standing
it's like
up.
in the middle of the room, basically.
That's
That's the account she gave. Sarah's pager beeps. She answers the beep. She goes to Bobby back in ballistics, and we realize that they were able to make a ballistics match, and the gun belongs to a Roger Wilder, who is my second spot.
Yes.
The guest star.
I will say, however, I was so confused. I don't remember if they say that he owned the gun or belonged to, but it was connected to him.
It was connected to him.
Because it was used in a different crime.
Yes, it was
used in a different crime. And that sent me down this path of like, well, who did own the gun? Where they never like talked about where the gun came from, how the person who inevitably shot people got the gun. Kind of jumping ahead because we haven't gotten to the whole Roger scene yet. But it was like, this was like on my watch. I was like, wait, what? Isn't this like super important? And they don't need it, but at the same time, I was just like completely like confused, like why they didn't address it. But yes, You're spot the guest star.
Yes. So this is Jeff Kober, and I probably ended up recognizing him from a few different things, but the thing that I know him from most acutely is a like second or third season episode of The X-Files where he played a character called Bear. And we had another spot the guest star in the same episode of The X-Files.
He has a very unique voice.
He has a very unique voice.
I hadn't even seen his face, I don't think. And you hear him talking, I went, where do I know this guy from?
He has a he's a very like unique cadence. Like how he talks is very
timbre. Yeah. I would know him. He plays a character called Jacob Hale on the hit FX TV show Sons of Anarchy, which I've seen every episode of, keeping with my theme of guilty pleasures. It's actually a pretty good show, but it is like a little bit of a guilty pleasure show. And I if you had asked me how many episodes of Sons of Anarchy he was in, I would have told you, like 2 or 3 seasons worth. Yeah. And he's only in like a very small number of episodes, which I learned looking him up. But yeah, he's like great villain voice. Reminds me of like Jeff Brolin, like Thanos voice.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, he was also in New Girl. I probably also know him from New Girl. He was in 3 episodes of New Girl. So I'm sure I know him from that too, because I've definitely seen that entire series. But I more, as soon as I opened his IMDb, there was a picture of him from the X-Files episode, and I was like, oh yeah. Like that's definitely him. Like I definitely know him from that. So Sarah's with him in like a weird interrogation room at the prison.
Very spacious interrogation room.
Very
prison.
Spacious. It's
really we could have used this for cells, but this is like a conference room, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, why not? And after some prodding by Sarah, he admits that he went to Melissa's house, but no one was home, and so he busted the place up. And in the
Well,
process of busting the place up, a gun fell out of a coffee table, and so he got a gun out of the deal. He's not upset. Like he's happy about how it worked
this
out.
story is basically every fake story a criminal would ever tell about why they
Yes.
were at the scene of a crime.
100%.
Oh, I wasn't there to shoot the prosecutor who had just put me in jail. No, I was there to just rough up her place, let her know, like get her
Yeah.
back a little bit. And
Yeah.
a gun just fell out of a table. So I took it and I
Weird.
used it to rob a convenience store
So
6 months later.
strange.
I was like, I need to shoot her and her husband. Why would I do? I'm not that kind of criminal.
I'm not that sort of guy.
Turns out, apparently, he's telling the truth. And
Yeah.
I think
Spoiler alert.
there's like a scene later on where Sarah indicates that the conversation continues longer than what they show us.
Yes.
They largely, I mean, there's a back and forth here, but she's not like spending a lot of time and energy getting to a point where you would believe that she would believe him.
No,
They kind of like
think,
hand wave that later on.
Yeah, I think when they get back to it, she's still kind of incredulous about it. She's still sort of like, how can
There's
I
a
believe this
walking
guy? But
talk
she's,
with
there's a
Nick
walk and talk in
later
a bit. Yeah.
where he's like, well, he could like, I mean, like he had enough where it made it like seem like, okay, the switch is flipped. I'm believing this guy. Now, if I believe this guy, what does that
Yeah, what does that mean?
mean?
Yeah.
And so she really does eventually take him at face value. But yeah, she does like not seem to believe him at all during the scene, which is why it was kind of confusing later on.
Yeah.
Where she was like, so my understanding is there was more than they showed, and then she
Yes.
followed that through, and then since it all checked out, then okay, I have to accept that evidence. And then if I accept that evidence, the next logical thought is the rest of the storyline.
Yep. So then we flip back and forth between two different scenes. One wherein Jim Brass is with the woman who we learn is Wendy, who pinned the man, and then Catherine is with the man who was pinned, who we learned is Mr. Reed. So we flip flop back and forth between these two, and in the process of that, we learn that Mr. Reed was out there because he was searching in the dead of night for an apartment. Which Catherine, of course, is like, what are you talking? Catherine's like, what are you talking about? Like, what? Why would you be looking at an apartment in the middle of the night? And we also learn that he has wearing size 8.5 shoes, and he doesn't mind Catherine looking at the shoes that are on his feet, but he does not want her getting a warrant to check out all of his other shoes.
Yes.
He is not on board for that.
There's a great line where she's like, the arts of jiu-jitsu just flow through me. I am just their vessel. Yeah. He's like, you beat the crap out of that dude.
She did. Which, spoiler alert, good for her. And as he's leaving, Catherine, and we learn pretty soon afterwards, Catherine is doing this very intentionally. Catherine asks him why he didn't file charges. Like, hey, if you were doing nothing wrong, and this woman just assaulted you and beat you up and like busted your lip, like kind of weird that you don't want to press charges. And he's like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
okay, yeah. Oh, I do. No, I do. And so we kind of like peer into a quick scene where Jim Brass is with Mr. Reed, and very poignantly, he's like, hey, like once you sign this complaint becomes a legal binding document.
Yeah, very intentional, I think, to eliminate or to be able to say that if it were ever try to be like dismissed as like a poison fruit evidence kind of later on, like we're not entrapping you. Nope. We didn't make you do this. Nope. We warned you what would happen if we did it.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, the idea is they are looking to keep investigating him under the guise of investigating this crime, and that allows them to process evidence, which once they put into a database, if it happens to match anything else, it's fair game.
Yep. So then Catherine is with Wendy. She's understandably upset. She's like, hey, I took down this crazy rapist, and like now I'm getting charged with assault. And Catherine, without saying too much, is like, look, the evidence that you're giving us now is like basically going to make or break a case. So just keep that in mind.
I appreciate the consistency of this scene because this comes up in other episodes all the time. People want to know what's going on in a scene, like victims' families and things like that. And they don't have to be like, we can't talk to you about a case, can't tell you about a case, can't tell you about a case. And she's maintaining the same level of professionalism, but, just giving sort of the the ambiguous "it won't be for nothing,"
Yeah.
moment, which is what she has to do when it's like, I can't. I mean, I can bring you to the courthouse and make sure you're in the same hallway with the alleged crime committer, which is what everyone in CSI seems to do.
Evidently.
But
Yeah.
but I cannot tell you about the case.
Right.
Which is what you use,
That crosses the line.
Yeah.
We then are at the scene we were referencing earlier. Sarah is looking at crime scene photos. She then goes into the hallway. She runs into Nick. This is where we learn that that Roger Wilder had a full understanding, the whole layout of the house. He knew things that if he just went in and did a quick murder and pieced out, he probably wouldn't have known.
Yeah, I didn't think this was this is the thing that I was alluding to earlier, but
Yeah, it's not
I
the
also don't think it's great
It's not
defense.
great. No, it's not.
All you did was confirm that you were there.
Yeah, but it puts a nugget of doubt in Sarah's mind, and so then
I thought there would be a weird later, because they have photo evidence that before the place was smashed up.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought they were gonna Sarah was gonna dig up. My initial thought was she was gonna dig up a different police report that was while she was in the hospital, somebody broke into the crime scene.
Yeah.
And broke the tape and broke everything in the apartment, and that corroborated his story. But they didn't. No, they presumably she would have had to file a police report,
which she didn't want to, because she got home and she realized that the gun was.
Yeah, maybe not. I guess, but also there was a murder committed there, and they often go back to those crime scenes.
This is true.
Then again, it was a guy's last week, so I guess that actually might check out.
Yeah. So this is leading her to question why didn't CSI find the gun? Right? If the gun was there, why didn't CSI find the gun? And then
the table was see-through. How could you ever find it?
I don't know. But even more markedly concerning is that as she's looking at the blood stain on the victim's shirt, the only way that the blood would have moved in that direction, because blood follows gravity, right? So if you were standing up and you got shot, and this was a button-down shirt, so you got shot right near one of the buttons, it would go into your waistline.
Down along the buttons.
But this did not. It
went towards the pocket.
Went towards the pocket, which Sarah realizes means that he had to be laying down when he was shot, because that's the only way that the blood would have flowed in that direction. So
they get a little bit more into the blood flow later in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really they just kind of talk about it.
Yeah, they talk about it
later. And I was on the second watch, I was staring at the blood pattern, be is that there? I was I don't know. I don't know enough about blood patterns
to know. I'm not a
to know jack crap. I was maybe they did it right. Maybe they didn't do it right. Who knows?
And then we have Greg Sanders walking up to Catherine, the Mr. Reed, because they were calling him I put apartment hunter. I was what was I trying to talk about here? And then I was oh, right, because he was looking for an apartment.
Hunter.
The apartment hunter left his DNA at a B&E about 5 months ago. Curious. So, but before we follow that thread, Sarah
did they not tie that? I'm just realizing this. Did they not tie his DNA to the semen?
No, because the semen belonged to the kid.
Oh, you're right. It did. Well, they used the fingerprint to find the kid.
Yes,
but I think it belonged to the kid. It was
okay. So. Because if it belonged to him, they would have been the semen's his.
That's what I assumed was going to happen when they took the evidence.
So the semen was the one outside.
Yeah. Escalation, right?
Yeah, no, I know, but
right. I assume when they did the jacket, that was they wanted the blood to do the DNA to try to make that connection, and maybe I guess they didn't match it, but they must have cut a scene or something.
Yeah, maybe
they said it wasn't a match.
Yeah. But before we follow that one, we're with Sarah. She visits Melissa in the hospital, and Sarah has to detail how she killed her husband. And then how her husband shot her.
So one big thing I want to say here is the first time I watched this episode, I really missed probably the most important nugget of information in this entire scene.
Okay.
Which is that the prosecutor, there was a whole thing about every speech you gave about justice. And she's I still believe in justice. Mm-hmm. The undertone is the prosecutor wanted Sarah to solve the crime.
Yes.
She just thought she was going to be dead, so it wouldn't matter. And which is almost crazy because on one hand, you're I'm probably going to be dead, but I could either not do the surgery and for sure be dead soon, or do the surgery and then I'll probably die. But if I don't die, I've literally just indicted myself, like I've
Yeah.
incriminated myself in a murder that I committed. And so that logic is a little weird, but like I think maybe that's why I didn't get it. But I was watching CSI, I said, oh, wait a second. I didn't catch that the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
She for sure
She
knew
wanted.
Sarah was going to solve this crime.
Yeah, so Sarah details how she killed her husband, how how she ended up getting shot, how she hit the gun, and I'll say that this was, I don't know how I feel about this. So she claims that the reason that she shot her husband is because her husband abused her,
Yes,
but no part
which
of this episode confirms or denies that.
correct. And
And
I
so it's
guess
like, is she, as a great prosecutor and like knowing the law very well, building up her defense? Because yes, she did want Sarah to solve the case, but she wanted Sarah to solve the case thinking that she was going to be dead and not face prosecution. And now she's alive. So is this a ploy to get her sentence reduced
I
by
think
saying that, like,
as
in a sense, this was,
I think as the audience member, you're supposed to believe her. I think
yeah.
that both because she's generally portrayed as a good and righteous person,
Mm.
and actually there's a lot of merit to her saying that. Yeah, no, I do believe in justice. Like I knew you would figure it out. Like
Yeah.
that gives the closure to his family. That gives
Yeah.
everything. And then like I don't get to just die and be remembered as this great prosecutor. You're going to sully my like all the good things I'm going to do are going to be for nothing. Like people aren't going to remember me as this great person. They're going to know I was a murderer. She doesn't that virtue, like you're the worst version. You're not as bad as the worst version of yourself, right? And so she's explaining to Sarah why she would murder her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other great moment is she shoots her husband and she basically falls down on the ground and crying.
Collapses. Yeah.
And it's just like that. It's supposed to be that moment where somebody is like out of like that sense of relief and she knows what she did was wrong, but she just felt trapped in I'm not as a defense to her actions, just as sort of like the mindset of the human.
Yeah.
Right. And the way that abuse can drive a person to be, different than their base self.
Yeah.
And I think that, and so I think as an audience member, you're for sure supposed to believe her. And I think Sarah believes her. She doesn't forgive her. She doesn't think it's a defense. Like she doesn't think it's a good defense. I think, but I think you're supposed to believe that that's true and hopefully not feel bad for the dead husband. But at the end of the day, like in a lot of ways, that was like her vigilante justice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you tie that back to that, or like an initial opening is like, I was like, she probably felt that there was no way that she could get justice with him. So this is the way that she would get justice for herself and then get out of the situation. And then she also paid for her life as a result of it.
Yeah.
So, well, actually she didn't, because she didn't die in the surgery, but she almost died twice.
She almost died in the surgery. This is true. But she lived and now will presumably face justice. We then have Catherine with Grissom, and he was working on his like chart of escalation. They're trying to figure out, okay, like if he started here, and then Grissom is starting to realize that he's actually going like back to his comfort zone. So the perpetrator, instead of like continuing to spiral out, is actually like kind of like going back into the comfort zone. And the B&E happened on Appian Street, and so they were like, hey, if we don't know where he's going, why don't we go to where he was and like canvas and like see if there's some information that we can find out. So Nick and Warwick are out there canvassing. Jim Brass and Catherine are doing the same. And I will say this was actually probably one of the only sort of like moments of brevity that I enjoyed in this episode. Jim Brass fairly is like, what am I supposed to say? Like, oh, hey, there was like a crazy rapist running around your neighborhood, and I just like need to come in and turn your apartment upside down. Like, he was just being like, what do you want me to say?
The place that Catherine and Brass, like, Nick and Warwick, they're solo, right? They're canvassing, they're going around telling people.
Yeah.
Catherine and Brass are actually
together,
doing something different, which is they're going to the place where they found the DNA in hopes to find more evidence there.
Yes.
Which is why he's like, we have to like tear her house apart because we think their crime was committed here.
Yeah.
And because I think they know that the person has moved out and there's a different person living there.
I don't know if they
I
I don't
didn't
know if they
really
know that.
figure that out at the end if that was true or not. But there were definitely moving boxes, so somebody was either coming or going.
Oh, okay. Oh no, I'll explain that. So they
Okay,
knock on
yeah.
the door, and then the person who answers the door is Mr. Reed. And Jim Brass is immediately on edge. He's like, "This is not the address that you had on
Yeah,
your
they were
driver's
not expecting to
license."
see each other.
Yes, he's like, "This is not the address you had on your driver's license." And he's like, "Oh yeah,
I moved.
I moved," or blah blah blah. Like, and this is when Catherine, after kind of looking around and having a few moments, realizes that he moved into the apartment where he committed his first crime. So this
Yes.
is his apartment, and he's in the process of moving. He moved
Yeah.
into where he committed his first crime.
Correct. Yeah. That I got.
So,
Well, I guess the thing is, I guess I'll wait till we get there in a second, but he's not the only person in this apartment right now.
no, he is not. So Catherine starts moving down the hallway in his apartment. She has Jim Brass kind of hold him, Mr. Reed, back. She spots a bloody clump of hair. She then finds a woman bound up in the closet. And so I guess, yeah, so your question is this in fact still her apartment and he came back here?
I don't know if this is the same person who he committed against originally, and they're like bound up in the closet and they've been here for some period of time. I didn't know if this is like the person who just moved in and it's like a new person, and so then it's doing them, or if he kidnapped them from somewhere else and brought them. They never really explained exactly who this person is.
They do not.
But or like who's living there. But it looks like there's like women's clothes in the closet. So I don't think this is actually him living there, unless he's moving his stuff in after he's kidnapped this person in the closet. So the whole scene is super bizarre. But just to bring it back, it's like this is the location of his first crime,
yes,
for sure. And
yes, that we know.
That's why they were going there.
Yes.
Then when they found him there, it was like WTF.
Yep.
And then for some reason he agreed to let them into his apartment.
I don't. Yeah, that part I don't get at all.
With the person in the closet, that's hubris, my friends.
It is. It is indeed. So that wraps up storyline A, and then we have one final scene with Sarah and Grissom. They're in the locker room, and Sarah is trying to work for what she's learned, right? This is a woman that she trusted and thought that she knew. And so, she's telling Grissom, "Hey, you think you know somebody?" And Grissom's like, "Nope, I never think that. Like, I never think and Sarah's like, you never? Like, you never think that?" And then Sarah tells him a story about how she found what she thought was a bag of dirt under her brother's bed. So she brought it to her mom with like all the best of intentions, but instead it was her brother's bag of weed. And we wrap the episode on, sometimes the best of intentions are fraught, are riddled with fraught.
Which is a Grissom quote.
Which is a Grissom quote. Instead of Grissom quoting someone else as he is off to do, he comes up with his own quote, and that's how we end the episode. So, Nick, what did you think about today's episode?
I'm torn on this episode because I really didn't enjoy the episode too much. I gave it a 2 out of 5.
Okay.
But I was torn between whether it's a play or like a rewatch, because I did catch things in the second watch through that I didn't catch the first time. And there is like the thing is, a storyline to me is like not a rewind, but the B storyline is.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that carries the episode enough. I actually think that like there's just a lot of things maybe cut out of this episode that just made it feel a little weird. We talked about it being jarring. The topic's a little jarring, which is like, doesn't make it a fun episode, but doesn't mean you shouldn't watch it. It's definitely not a skip, but I think that for me on the whole of the episode, I'd call it a play, not a rewind, but it's pretty close either way. I think really the determining factor is just not enough scenes of the Vegas Strip.
I mean, that's true. This is a very, very not Vegas-y episode. So for me, I rate this a little bit higher. I rate this a 3. Yeah, I was going to say like 2 points down. I'll say 3 out of 5. And I'll say that because from a technical standpoint, it has what I generally like from an episode. It has 2 storylines. Everybody's involved. There's a bit of backstory. Like we get a little bit of character development. Like we have like, some moment here with Sarah as she's like grappling with having to realize that someone that she considered to be probably more than just a professional colleague. Like she went to go visit her in the hospital. So like someone she considered to be a friend, having to see her in an entirely new light. And so from like a technical standpoint, it has everything I like.
Good evidence, some cool different evidence techniques, different people at the lab get involved.
Yeah. All the guest actors were great. Even the actor who played Justin was great because Justin was so terrible. So that actor did a great job of playing a
Really
very, very terrible person.
Really creepy, felt like a real person that you would not trust. You know what I mean? Like,
100%.
give you the skivvies kind of moment before you really know what was up. So yeah.
So, but I think as we talked about, I think it's tough when both storylines are heavy. I felt the balance was better in the previous episode where we had like one heavy storyline and then we had one like kind of quirky fun storyline.
Was that last episode? What was this? What was that episode we talked about recently where there was like one super heavy storyline and one fun storyline? Was that just last episode?
It might have been the last episode. Yes, it was. It was the last episode.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think there's just like, it's so close. It's like, I feel like 3 little changes and I would have like, oh, this is a great episode. Rewatch this episode. 3.5 star. Yeah. And they're so small, but they're so poignant. I always reflect too, like how much does like the crime, the topic, the tone, I don't mind when it impacts like my overall rating, as long as it's like a small impact. Like you're allowed to like certain things more or less than other topics, but sometimes when I'm like, whether it's good to like rewatch the episode or fun to rewatch the episode, sometimes I'm kind of like, it feels unfair because I don't want them to not tackle tough episodes, but it's really, it's like I'm not the kind of person who watches drama movies 3 times, but Disney comedy musicals, I'm all over it.
Yeah. You know? No, I would give this a watch. I think similar to you, if you could just rewatch storyline B, rewatch for storyline B, because there are definitely things that you pick up in a second watch through of storyline B that you might not on a first watch.
Yeah, that is a clear rewatchable, both from the perspective side, but also just like there's less cringe on that side of the
there is,
the
and
story.
I think that's one of the knocks in this episode was in having 2 heavy storylines. The attempts at humor, especially in storyline A, just did not land well.
I think you could cut out that kid at the mall and use that time to polish that storyline a little bit more directly, because again, that's also like a red herring because it didn't like give you the next piece of evidence or anything.
No,
that if you had just done that, this episode could have got to a much better place.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5, just because it does technically, from a technical standpoint, really jot down, what I enjoy. I'll give it a watch. Definitely not. I don't think you need to rewatch it again. If you want to rewatch it, just rewatch storyline B. And
this is a pie episode, by the way. Season 3, episode 14, 3.14.
It is a pie episode. We should have celebrated. We'll be back next week. We'll see how we feel about next week's episode when we are back with season 3, episode 15, Lady Heather's Box.
Ooh, Lady Heather.
Lady Heather.
I know who that is.
Yeah,
I remember who that is.
You know who that is. So we'll
Lady
be back.
Heather's Box. That sounds like a euphemism.
Yes, it does. So we'll be back next week.
Oh man, you seem excited about this episode. All right.
I think it's safe to say that I think I just like the Lady Heather character. Okay. So knowing that she's going to be in an episode, I'm like, yeah. Like I don't specifically really remember this episode, but I'm just like, Lady Heather, yeah. Like
something fun's going to happen.
Sign me up. My queer heart, like, look at her. Like, so we'll be back next week with that. In the meantime, you can support us on Patreon, even though we haven't loaded anything on Patreon for a while. So we gotta load some stuff onto Patreon. So we'll load some stuff on the Patreon. But you can go on there and find us at Who Are You Calling the CSI Podcast. You can find us on Facebook the same way. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and at Who Are You CSI Pod. And you can find us on our website at whoareyoucsipod.com. But otherwise, we will talk to you next week.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.